Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching this. This video will be a part 2 to the video that I posted just before. So if you haven't seen the video for the kidnapping of Cary Stayner, please do watch that before this video. I told you that this case would be in 2 parts as we haven't finished talking about the Stayner family. We now need to talk about another member of the family, Cary Stayner, which is Stephen's older brother. So I mentioned that Cary had trichotillomania, which is the condition of pulling your hair out and creating bald patches. Well, Cary was bullied severely for this. His parents didn't believe in counselling or therapy, so Cary dealt with this on his own. More to being on his own, for 7 years, his mum and dad were fixated on finding Stephen. So the other siblings were not as supportive as they needed to be in their early years, and I think this negatively impacted Cary. Just a little mention, if you already know the story of Cary Stayner, I just want to say that anything that I mention, I am not defending Cary. There is no defence for his next actions. People lead really hard lives and go on to be amazing, wonderful humans. So I'm not giving Cary any sort of pass for what he is about to do. Absolutely not defending him here. Let's carry on. I did not mean that pun there. Cary was a really smart child and he was put into accelerated lessons at school. His teachers and classmates would later note how clever he was. Cary was an excellent artist and especially good drawing cartoons. He contributed to his school newspaper and was later chosen as most creative in his graduating class. Cary would much later be diagnosed with autism, which would attribute to his lack of social skills and neurodivergence. Cary was known to be quite a quiet person, but on occasion he would show his true colours. One time when one of Cary's sisters had a friend over for a sleepover, everyone believed that he was just a clever kid going through a very tough time, but to his sister's friend he is said to have exposed himself to her, and he was incredibly thrilled by her reaction. He would also later confess that he had some very dark, very messed up thoughts about women. He said that from the age of 7 years old, he would fantasize about kidnapping and murdering women. He had these thoughts before his brother was kidnapped, so this does not link with Stephen's kidnapping. Cary would also have horrific thoughts at his workplace. He went on to work as a window installer and he had thoughts about driving his truck into his workplace and killing everyone in there, and once everyone was dead, he would set fire to the building. At this point, he hadn't physically harmed anyone. These were just thoughts, and although really concerning, he had not put these into action. Stephen passed away in 1989, and Cary's uncle Jerry would also be murdered by a fatal shooting in 1990. Jerry was shot in the home in which Jerry and Cary shared. It's said that from this moment on, Cary became a lost soul. The thoughts grew worse and began to completely consume Cary, and in 1991 he attempted to unalive himself with carbon monoxide. He would live from this, and in 1995 he was admitted into a mental institution. He wasn't in there for very long, however, and I truly wish that they had kept him in there or just simply refused to let him go, as then maybe future events could have been avoided. I think there is something about that though. There definitely is in England that if you put yourself in a mental institution, they can't keep you there. But if you have been put in there by police, etc., then I think they have authority over your condition and your choice of leaving. So I believe that Cary put himself into the mental institution, and that is why he was able to leave at any point that he chose. In 1997, he actually got charged with possession of illegal substances, but the charges were eventually dropped, which let him go as a free man. I mentioned earlier that when Stephen returned home, Cary was camping at Yosemite National Park. Well, in 1997, Cary was hired as a handyman in Cedar Lodge Motel in Yosemite National Park. I also want you to cast your mind back to the first video, because I find this incredibly interesting. Cary is now a handyman at Cedar Lodge Motel. Irving and Kenneth worked at Yosemite National Park. I just found the coincidence really quite chilling. So Cary had been camping at Yosemite for years, and now that he was working in the motel, it would just give him greater observation about the ins and outs of the park. There was a road not many people knew of, as Yosemite is such a huge place. Some people will know of this road and dump unwanted belongings. In England, we call this fly tipping. I'm not sure if that term is used anywhere else, but in England, we call this fly tipping. It was a small road off of the usual track, but this road would later become a very key point of Cary's master plan. The motel was an ideal location for anyone wanting to explore Yosemite National Park. It was a cheap and cheerful location just outside of the park, and for Carol Sund, Julie Sund, and Julie's best friend Silvina Peloso, this location was perfect for their sightseeing getaway. Silvina lived in Argentina and took a winter break to go and live with the Sund family. Carol wanted her trip to be memorable, so she decided to take the girls away for a little sightseeing getaway to Yosemite National Park. Carol was a very caring person. She had dedicated her life to helping abused children, and she was said to have been one of the kindest people you could ever hope to meet. Julie and Silvina had been friends since they were children, and they were always around each other whenever Silvina came to America. The girls were known to be the average 15 and 16-year-old. They were incredibly kind, they were incredibly outgoing, and they were very friendly to others. They arrived at the motel, and once they were settled, they went out sightseeing. They took their camera with them, and they took pictures of the sights, and they also took pictures of themselves. It was February 1999, and the park was especially picturesque as snow had fallen all around. Some roads were completely inaccessible, and most places were only accessible by foot. The trio would walk for miles, and when it became too dark, they would return to the motel. At the same time, Cary was dating a lady called Lena. Lena had 2 daughters, and they all believed Cary to be a very charming, handsome, and safe man. He would treat the daughters very well. He would draw them pictures, he would buy them gifts, and he would even teach them how to dive. Cary, however, was plagued by his demons, and even though he treated Lena and the daughters very well, and the daughters and Lena really liked Cary, on 3 separate occasions he had been planning their murders. It's said that on the 3rd occasion he had planned to kill the family, but was stopped as another person was on the grounds of the family home. This was just after Valentine's Day, and because he had been stopped from killing Lena and her 2 girls, he decided to go back to his place of work and find a family to kill there. That evening, Carol, Julie, and Silvina had returned to their motel room. They were playing games and enjoying their time together before they went to bed. Cary had also then turned up to the motel room, and he had murder on his mind. He saw a single car in the parking lot, a red Pontiac. He also then noticed that a motel room window was left open. It was open enough for him to look through and see who was in the motel room. He spied through the window and noticed 2 girls and a woman were sleeping. He did not see a man with them, and then concluded that they would be the perfect victims for his deadly plan. He knocked the motel door and woke Carol. Carol went to the door and answered it to see Cary standing there. It said that she wouldn't have been worried because he was the handyman and she would have seen him around the motel. He then lied to Carol and said that there's a leak in an upstairs room. All he was doing, however, was just making sure that it was literally Carol and 2 girls in that room. He later came back with a gun and said that this was a robbery. He told them all that if they cooperated, no one would get hurt. He then used duct tape to bind their hands, their feet, and their mouths. Cary would later say in an interview that they all cooperated to every single one of his requests. Cary realised that this would be an easy kill and then proceeded to strangle and kill Carol. He then assaulted Silvina sexually and strangled her. He put the bodies of Carol and Silvina in the boot of the red Pontiac and took Julie alive. He would then drive about an hour north to Vista Point, where he would then slit Julie's throat. It's then said that after he killed Julie, he took a moment to take in the scenery before leaving Julie there and then taking Carol and Silvina to that road that was often used for fly tipping and then torched the car. Carol and the girls were meant to meet Carol's husband at the airport for their return journey, but they never turned up. The trio became missing persons, and the police and the FBI were baffled by their disappearance. They had no leads, and it was becoming desperate. It had been a month of investigation before the investigators found the torched car. When they investigated that crime scene, they also found the camera close by. They found Carol and Silvina in the trunk, but they could not find Julie. They had a real hope that Julie was still alive, so they put all their investigators out to act on urgency. They developed the camera roll and found a series of photos that suddenly ended with the trio being back at the motel. There were no further photos taken, which indicated that something had happened at the motel. The caretakers and the staff were questioned, but no one became a suspect. After the interviews, a mysterious note landed in the police's hands. It was a basic sketch that gave the location of Julie's body. The top of the note said, "We have had fun with this one." Cary later said that he got inspiration to create this note after watching a Unabomber documentary. Cary wanted to leave the note completely unrelated to him, so he got someone else to lick the envelope that it came in. I've seen a couple of documentaries about this case, and it's at this point that I don't even know what words I'm trying to find, but the family are sick with worry because they are just hoping that Julie is alive, and all the while Cary knows that she's dead. Cary knows that she's been brutally murdered by his hands, and he's getting some immense sick joy off of the fact that they are searching for Julie and he knows that she's dead. It is so vile as well that he's created this sketch to impersonate the Unabomber because he's inspired. It just makes me really sick, and this is what I mean when I said earlier I'm not defending him in any way. I think what he has done is disgusting to the highest level. And the family do then find out that Julie has also been murdered, and I want to tell you that to this day it still haunts them. It hurts them immensely, and they are still suffering. He took 3 lives that day, but actually he impacted so many more and essentially ended their lives too. The police investigated local well-known criminals. They also got a statement from someone who claimed to have killed the 3 girls, but they worked out that this was fake. The police investigation went cold until another murder happened in the same location. Joie Armstrong was a 26-year-old woman who ran educational programs for children at Yosemite. She was full of energy and everyone adored the person that she was. Cary was driving and then he noticed Joie was packing up her car for a trip. He said in a later interview that I realised she was alone and I just couldn't help myself. He parked his car and he made sure that she was completely alone. When he was completely sure, he threatened her with a weapon and made her get into his car. He bound her as he did before, and then he began driving. The window on the passenger side of the car was open, and when Joie saw an opportunity, she dived out of the car and started running. She ran as fast as she could, but Cary was running right behind her, and Cary knew Yosemite really well. He eventually caught up to her, he grabbed her, he threw her to the ground, and he slit her throat. And I'm really sorry, because this is horrible, but he slit her throat so deeply that he ended up decapitating her. Joie's death was horrific and brutal, but it became the key to identifying the killer. Cary was sloppy. He left behind a mountain of clues, and Joie's cabin, upon search, also gave evidence that related to Cary. Where Joie was abducted was also tyre tracks that could help the police work out which car had abducted her. Blood was left at the crime scene, and things became definite when Cary did not turn up for work the following day. Police became suspicious of Cary, and a couple of days later they arrested him. Within hours of his interrogation, Cary confessed to all 4 murders. Friends of Cary, his family, his colleagues, and his girlfriend were all shocked to find out that he had committed these murders. He also confessed that his original intention was to kill Lena and her daughters. And when Lena found out about this, she understandably had a meltdown. Lena then also started to recognize the red flags. She told the police that he always had a backpack that had a knife, a gun, and duct tape inside it. Lena puts a lot of blame on herself and feels guilty that she introduced Cary to her daughters. She also knew that at any point he could have used the items in the backpack on her and her daughters. Cary received a life sentence without parole for the murder of Joie. To avoid a possible death sentence, he pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder, felony first-degree murder, kidnapping resulting in death, and attempted aggravated sexual abuse resulting in death. During the sentencing hearing, Cary actually shocked the entire courtroom by breaking down in tears and apologising. "I wish I could take it back, but I can't. I wish I could tell you why I did such a thing, but I don't even know myself. I wish there was a reason, but there isn't. It's senseless. When Cary was in court for the murders of Carol, Julie and Silvina, he claimed insanity and pleaded not guilty due to this. In court, the family members had to hear recorded confessions of how their family members died. Cary also admitted that he attempted to kill 2 Finnish girls in 1998, but fled when another man had turned up. When asked if he would kill again in his interviews, he replied with, "Definitely, I would have killed until I was either caught or killed myself." He luckily was found sane, and for the murders of Carol, Julie and Silvina, he received the death penalty. He is still living on death row at the time of this video. Lena lives on with conflicted feelings. It's hard for me to think about him being behind bars, and I wonder what it's like for him being there, because he loved to be outside. He loved Yosemite, and in some way it's sad, but I don't forgive him. I can't. But at the same time, I still have a hard time looking at him as a monster. The families of the victims have never recovered and most likely never will. I know the death penalty takes years and this case is evident of that fact, but I do hope that he is put to death soon to give the families a tiny bit of peace. Although I don't know how likely this will be, as since 2006 in California there has been no executions. So those were the cases of the kidnapping of Steven Stayner and Cary Stayner, the Yosemite killer. I had heard about both of those cases individually, and weirdly enough, I just didn't correlate them together. But the idea that those 2 boys stemmed from the same family and had such, I don't want to say the word interesting in terms of cases, because, I mean, Steven's is interesting and heartbreaking, and Cary's is utterly horrific. But to think that they were brothers and both incredibly different people is shocking. There was also something in my research that I read that they wanted to name a park close to the area in which the boys grew up, and Steven's mum and dad, or Cary and Steven's mum and dad, wanted to call it Stayner Park, but because of what Cary would later do, they couldn't call it Stayner Park. So I think that's incredibly sad too, because Steven Stayner had made the name heroic, and Cary Stayner has now made the name tarnished with his crimes. There was a lot to cover, so if you have watched part 1 and part 2, thank you so much for being here and watching my content. If you like this content, please feel free to subscribe. That means that you won't miss a video. Please feel free to like the video, because then YouTube shows it to other people. And if you have any requests for future cases, please feel free to leave me a comment in the box below. And if you want to support the channel, the best thing you can do is do not skip the ads at the start of this video. The more people that watch the ads, the more YouTube is likely to again push this video to further viewers. So thank you in advance if you do that. But for now, that is all from me. I think my throat needs a rest as it sounds very croaky, so I'm very sorry if that was distracting in this video. I hope to see you in the next one. That's all from me, and thank you for watching, and bye bye for now.